Minister today finished 11 years in office. He was on a visit to his home state, Gujarat. He spoke directly to the people of Pakistan from the ramparts in Bhuj. He spoke directly to the children of Pakistan, saying that they need to make a choice between an army and a state that uses terror as an instrument of state policy, that they need to make a choice on whether or not this army and this state needs to continue to represent them or whether they should throw out their elected politicians and their army. And talking about the elected politicians in the army of Pakistan, the Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and the army chief, General Asim Munir, were both on a visit to Turkey. It is the first country that they are visiting after the recent conflict between India and Pakistan. It's an indication of the shoring up of this new partnership between Pakistan and Turkey. The bigger question is for India and for policymakers here in India. How should India respond to this new emerging axis between Ankara and Islamabad? But first, the Indian point of view to this ever-growing friendship between Turkey and Pakistan. Remember, it's not just now the first visit after Operation Sindoor, but even on the day of Pahalgam, on the 22nd of April, Shahbaz Sharif was in Turkey. He had a joint press conference with Recep Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, after Pahalgam, blaming India and calling it a false flag operation. So top government sources reveal that this is a realignment of Pakistan's traditional relationships. Shahbaz Sharif and General Asim Munir's visit to Ankara is nothing but a strategic Thanksgiving gesture. This is aimed at consolidating the Turkey-Pakistan collaboration against India and Indian interests, especially after Operation Sindoor. India sees Shahbaz Sharif and Asim Munir's visit to Turkey as the shaping of an anti-India alliance. It's a consolidation of military, diplomatic, and ideological fronts. Turkey gains from this as well. It hopes to at least gain some degree of geopolitical leverage through this posturing, whether it is in multilateral organizations like the OIC and the United Nations. Now, even as Shahbaz Sharif cozies up to Turkey, India is also keeping a close watch on Turkish firms that do business here in India and in the wider neighborhood. Less than 2 weeks after India's Bureau of Civil Aviation Security revoked the clearance of Turkish aviation company Celebi Airport Services, which was handling the ground operations in about 9 or so Indian airports, now top government sources are suggesting that the centre is also keeping a watch on certain Turkish NGOs that are working in the region, particularly in Bangladesh. The fear is that some of these NGOs pose a national security threat to India. Government sources reveal that they have reason to believe that a particular Turkish NGO is working against India's interests in Bangladesh. It's been active since the 1990s, even during Sheikh Hasina's time in that country. They've been working closely among the vast Rohingya population that the country has given refuge to. Government sources suspect that this particular NGO could have used its access to radicalize Rohingyas in Bangladesh. An international NGO watchdog has also noted that IHH, that's the name of this NGO, is a member of the Union of the Good. It's an umbrella organization of 50-plus Islamic NGOs, which was designated by the US government as an organization created by Hamas leadership, the terrorist organization in Gaza, to transfer funds through these NGOs, which will eventually be routed for terror activities by Hamas. So as this axis builds between Turkey and Pakistan, both on India's eastern and western fronts, what should New Delhi do? How does India counter this new and emergent axis? I decode what these developments could mean for India's sovereignty and stability in the subcontinent, and what can India do to try and counter Turkey and Pakistan coming together. The geopolitical sands of South Asia are shifting yet again, and India must pay close attention. In the aftermath of the latest round of India-Pakistan hostilities between April and May, one regional alliance that has come into sharper focus than ever before. It is the growing strategic closeness between Pakistan and Turkey. What began as a slow diplomatic flirtation over the last decade has now transformed into a full-spectrum partnership. It encompasses defense, diplomacy, and even an Islamist ideology. At the center of this emerging axis are the two principals, Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. There is a convergence of their national interests and also their political interests. And this has profound implications for India as India seeks to redraw its red lines with Pakistan post-Operation Sindoor. Shehbaz Sharif's recent visit to Turkey, just weeks after the high-profile Operation Sindoor, which was India's cross-border anti-terror strikes into heartland Pakistan, was not merely a symbolic visit. It was his first overseas visit after the conflict, and tellingly, Turkey was also the last country that he visited before the Pahalgam terror attack on the 22nd of April. In fact, on the day of that attack, on the 22nd of April, the attack that claimed 26 Indian lives, Shehbaz Sharif was there in Turkey. There was a press conference that he did side by side with Erdogan, in which Erdogan gave unqualified support to Pakistan. Shehbaz, in this trip, was also accompanied by Pakistan's all-powerful military chief, General Asim Munir, who has now been elevated to the rare and highly symbolic rank of Field Marshal. This sends a signal that civil-military unity is there behind this reach out, may I say, to Ankara. This was more than just a courtesy call being given to a partner. This was a strategic reaffirmation of where Pakistan is placing its bets for the long term. Turkey, for its part, has been unequivocal in its embrace of Pakistan. Over the past month, India has named and shamed Turkey for supplying military equipment, including the Bayraktar TB2 drones, the Asus-Guard drone surveillance systems, all of which was used by Pakistan during the recent hostilities with India. Indian officials have conveyed strong diplomatic protests on this. They have warned Turkey against enabling cross-border terrorism. In retaliation, New Delhi has also taken a hard economic line. Contracts with Turkish firms like Celebi Aviation, which was responsible for ground handling operations in at least 9 major Indian airports, have been scrapped. Several bilateral deals between Turkey and India have also been put on indefinite hold. Now, this marks a significant turning point in India-Turkey ties, which have been deteriorating steadily over Erdogan's vocal support for Kashmir and also his Islamist populism. But the recent events go beyond just rhetoric. Ankara is now not just talking the talk, it is walking the walk when it comes to defense exports, strategic support to Pakistan on multiple fronts, including multilateral fora like the Organization of Islamic Countries, OIC, and the United Nations. The Turkish defense relationship with Pakistan has grown manifold in recent years. It has culminated in a number of big-ticket arms deals. Turkey is currently building 4 Milgem-class corvette naval warships for the Pakistan Navy. It's a $1.5 billion deal. The first of these ships, PNS Babur, was commissioned last year. The rest are scheduled for delivery by 2026. In parallel, Turkish defense firms are also helping Pakistan upgrade its existing naval and air defense systems with new electronics, radar systems, and drone integration. The Bayraktar drones, proven in the battlefields of Libya and Ukraine, were in fact deployed by Pakistan's military in Kashmir and along the line of control in the recent hostilities. These are not merely surveillance platforms, but these are fully armed UAVs which are capable of precision strikes. Their use in the recent flare-up between India and Pakistan was a watershed moment. It signals a qualitative shift in Pakistan's asymmetric warfare against India. And Turkey has a definitive role in enabling that asymmetric warfare. India's concern goes beyond weapons. Ankara is also emerging as Pakistan's primary political patron at a time when traditional Gulf allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are cooling off their support for Islamabad. In fact, both Saudi Arabia and the UAE have cultivated strong strategic and economic ties with India over the last 10 years. It's been driven by trade, energy security, and of course there's a shared mutual interest in regional stability. In contrast, Erdogan's Turkey has positioned itself as a pan-Islamist power. It projects influence in the Muslim world from Gaza to Kashmir, and often it clashes with these Gulf monarchies like Saudi Arabia. For Pakistan, making this pivot to Turkey makes strategic sense, with both Saudi Arabia and the UAE increasingly unwilling to underwrite Pakistan's economy and also back it unconditionally on Kashmir, it is Turkey that offers both moral support and military hardware. Erdogan's own worldview, which is shaped by a neo-Ottoman view of the world and an Islamist revivalism, it dovetails very neatly with Pakistan's desire, one, to internationalize Kashmir, and two, to seek alternative sources of military and financial support. This deepening realignment has real consequences for India. The threat is not merely bilateral, but it's also regional. If Turkey continues to serve as Pakistan's primary arms supplier and its primary advocate on Kashmir, then India faces a two-front challenge, one of cross-border terrorism, another of international perception management. What's more worrying is the possible triangulation of ties between Turkey, Pakistan, and China. This loose triangulation could create a new bloc that is resistant to India's influence in the Muslim world. It could also push the Kashmir issue back onto global platforms like the United Nations and the OIC. The question is, how should India respond? First, diplomatically, India must build a coalition of its own. The warming of ties between India and Gulf countries must be consolidated further. It must be institutionalized, particularly with Saudi Arabia and UAE. Their unease with Turkey's ambitions can be leveraged to isolate Ankara within the Muslim world. India's relationship with Israel, which is now a key counterterrorism partner, must also be strategically projected. Second, economically, India should continue to apply selective pressure on Turkish interests in India. But this must be calibrated pressure. India should target those sectors where Turkish influence intersects with national security, whether it's aviation, defense, critical infrastructure. And third, on the military front, India must reassess its own UAV and counter-drone capabilities. If the Bayraktar drones are being used across the LOC, the Asus Guard are being used across the LOC, then India must develop, deploy, and if needed, even demonstrate its ability to detect, jam, and neutralize these threats. Indigenous drone programs, including the armed drones, must be fast-tracked. And lastly, India should not cede the ideological narrative. Turkey has been trying to project itself as the voice of the global Muslim community. India has a large and diverse Muslim population. It must highlight its own pluralism and its constitutional secularism as a counterpoint to Ankara's Islamist rhetoric. This includes proactive diplomacy with both OIC members and also a massive diaspora outreach. All right, how can India counter this emerging axis between Turkey and Pakistan? Turkey has been supplying Pakistan with weapons. It is also an ideological and political patron for internationalizing the Kashmir issue, both of which are anathema for India. Sushant Sareen is Senior Fellow with the Observer Research Foundation. He's now joining us. First of all, Shahbaz Sharif in Turkey on the day of Pahalgam, and there's a joint press conference where, Erdogan basically speaks the language of Pakistan. And now, after Operation Sindoor, the first country that both Shahbaz Sharif and Asim Munir visit happens to be Turkey. How does India counter this emerging Pakistan-Turkey? And for good measure, let's also add China to that axis.
Look, I think the partnership is not new. The partnership is a pretty old one. And for the Pakistanis to pretend that they are now taking it to a new strategic level means very little, because the Turks were giving them or selling them all kinds of defense equipment, which the Pakistanis were very readily willing to buy. But this strategic relationship also has certain limitations. Now, purely at a communal level, this relationship seems extremely strong. You have an Islamist radical in Erdogan running Turkey. You have an Islamist radical regime in Pakistan run by Asim Munir. I don't count Shahbaz Sharif for anything except for taking commissions on deals which they signed with the Turks. And I think there is a lot of commissions which also exchange hands between the Erdogan family, the Sharif family, and perhaps Asim Munir and some of his generals in his cabal. So they have this very fruitful relationship going. At the end of the day, one has to be, one has to look at the Turkish equipment which is being sold to the Pakistanis, because at least in the last engagement, it proved to be a complete dud. It didn't really create any significant problems for India. It didn't cause any kind of damage whatsoever.
Okay.
Turkish drones were taken out. Some of them were not even able to fly. All in all, for now, there doesn't seem to be any serious concern. What is of concern, however, when it comes to Turkey, is the fact that Turkey has also served as a very, very important propaganda base for Pakistan.
Correct.
The Turks, for many years now, have been using their media industry to churn out propaganda material for Pakistanis. They have been attracting people from India, including from Kashmir, instigating them, inciting them, indoctrinating them, and then using them for Pakistan's propaganda purposes. So that is a relationship which will continue.
So, Sushant, just thank you for that. I'm going to come back to you on another troublesome or troubled neighbor in India's eastern flank, this time Bangladesh, where there is a major political crisis after a chaotic last few months since the exit of Sheikh Hasina in August last year. The interim government, headed by Professor Muhammad Yunus, has now blamed foreign conspiracy for obstructing the normal functioning environment and for creating confusion and suspicion amongst the public. Of course, no prizes, in fact, for guessing which this foreign power is that he was referring to. He was clearly referring to India. India has outright rejected that assertion. Now, Yunus's remarks come at a time when his interim government continues to face huge backlash from the Bangladeshi public, as well as certainly from the quarters of the army. There is now an open rift between the Bangladesh Army Chief, General Wakar Zaman, and Muhammad Yunus. It is an ever-widening rift, and fundamentally it boils down to the demand now by the Army Chief that elections, democratic elections, have to be held by the end of the year, by December this year. Yunus, on the other hand, wants to delay that by at least another 6 months. So this is going to be a fundamental point of rupture between the Bangladesh Army Chief, General Wakar Zaman, and the head of the interim government, Professor Muhammad Yunus. Meanwhile, former Bangladeshi Prime Minister who was ousted, Sheikh Hasina, who's now in exile in India, she has hit out at Muhammad Yunus, accusing him of selling Bangladesh to America. She's referring to that same Saint Martin Island, which she said the Americans wanted even when she was in power, and then she refused to give up sovereignty of the Saint Martin Island to the United States. She, in fact, now says Yunus is doing exactly that. He is doing America's bidding by selling out sovereign Bangladesh territory, sovereign Bangladesh land into the hands of the Americans. This is a big charge that's been made by Sheikh Hasina. But it's not just the question of, the ongoing political tussle between the army chief and the head of the interim government. Ever since he assumed the reins of power under Yunus, Bangladesh seems to be on a downward spiral. From the outset, he had promised to hold early elections. In fact, that was one of the first things that he said right at the airport after landing back in Bangladesh after spending more than 10 years abroad. But he has yet to provide a specific date or a specific month or even a timeline by which he will be holding elections in Bangladesh, and that has caused a degree of concern. The army, the main opposition BNP party, they're all demanding elections be held as soon as possible with minimal reforms. Bangladesh is also struggling significantly, particularly in terms of attracting foreign investment. Following the withdrawal of US aid, which is the State Department's overseas aid arm, Switzerland too now has stopped donations, and all of this is delivering a major setback. In the first quarter, in fact, foreign investment has dropped to nearly 1/4 of what it was during the same period last year, and that reflects a 70% decline. According to the Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, food inflation was at 10.72% in January of this year. Non-food inflation was 9.32%. Yunus's inconsistent foreign policy, criticizing countries like India, while at the same time cozying up to countries like China, that has unsettled investors. He's also indicated a very growing close partnership with rogue countries like Pakistan, and all of that is causing a degree of consternation among foreign investors. The chief advisor to Bangladesh interim government has advocated for the extension of the Chinese trading routes and the Chinese economic routes by saying that since the northeast of India is landlocked, Dhaka, according to him, is the only guardian of the ocean for the entire region, and that has put him directly in the crosshairs of both Delhi as well as India's northeastern states. There is also no accountability. Yunus heads a government with no mandate from the people. Since coming to power, there have been riots, there have been atrocities on minorities, all of which has increased. More often than not, there is no action taken by the law enforcement agencies to prevent such riots from recurring.
There is no doubt that there is a rising unrest in Bangladesh. Bangladesh has been divided into two camps. In one side, there is the army chief and the army who wants election as soon as possible. There is BNP, which is one of the largest political party out there. They want election at the earliest and they don't want delay of election. And definitely there are people there who are supporting them. And also banned Awami League supporters. Though they are not coming out with their banner, but definitely they are there in Bangladesh. On the other hand, on the other side, there is Muhammad Yunus interim government, the National Citizens Party, which is supporting the Muhammad Yunus interim government, who have brought them because they were behind this July movement in Bangladesh, and a little bit of Jamaat there. Now this Bangladesh divided into two camps, that is very sure and that's quite clear. Adding to this, the latest development is there is now a protest going on in Dhaka Secretariat. The government employees, they are also now in protest because an ordinance have been brought by this interim government which is very harsh. Now they are protesting on that too. That has continued today and that is going to continue tomorrow also.
All right, I want to go back to Sushant Sareen of the Observer Research Foundation. So this whole public sparring that's been going on, Sushant, between the Bangladesh Army Chief and Professor Muhammad Yunus, the head of the interim government, is the stage now set for Yunus to be ousted? Because he's not quite giving a rationale or a cogent reason for why elections are getting delayed. The Awami League is asking about it. The BNP is asking about it. Now even the Army Chief, Wakar Zaman, is asking that question. Why are you not holding elections as per the agreed timeline? And if that's not going to happen, is Bangladesh, just like Pakistan, also staring at a military coup?
Well, I think the problems in Bangladesh are only deepening. They're not able to get around, they're not, this current regime is not able to function. It's not able to provide any kind of administration. It is trying to juggle with too many competing aims. It wants to take on India. It is doing everything possible that is inimical to India. It is getting into a bed with the Pakistanis. There are reports of the Pakistani ISI re-establishing its bases in Bangladesh and using Bangladesh now as a center for exporting terrorism into India, something which used to happen about 15, 16 years back. That is something which the Yunus regime has started once again. But that also means giving a free hand to elements who are going to be the cannon fodder of this Islamist jihad, which the so-called Nobel laureate wants to wage on India. And that means, disturbances on the streets of Bangladesh, which we are seeing. Now, clearly, there is a sense of disquiet in the Bangladesh army. There are also very serious divisions within the Bangladesh army. And the Bangladesh army top brass seems to think that because of the feckless governance, because of the disarray in administration, the economy not able to take off, actually tanking, law and order situation becoming worse and worse, something needs to be done. And even if reforms have to take place, they cannot be top-down reforms. Those reforms have to have a national consensus and have to have some degree of legitimacy, which will only come through an election. Now, Yunus wants to stay in power till the end of his life, whenever that might be. What is the guarantee that by next June he will call elections? And what is it that he proposes to do in the period between December and June, which he cannot do now between June and December of this year? Why does he want to prolong it to June of next year? What's that game plan? What great new breakthrough will be made in those 6 months, which cannot be made in the next 6 months? He is not giving a clear answer to that. And the excuse being used is a very common excuse, which is also used in Bangladesh's twin brother, Pakistan, which is that, this regime has come and it needs to undertake all the necessary reforms.
Sushant, we'll leave it at that. Like you said, it's going to be a year in a couple of months in August since Sheikh Hasina was ousted. There is no reason, no cogent explanation for why elections are not being held. And instead, Professor Muhammad Yunus has been training his guns on India, blaming India for all the woes and troubles that his country seems to be facing. Meanwhile, let's talk about what's happening back home here in India. Prime Minister Modi today marked 11 years in office as Prime Minister. He chose to mark it in his home state of Gujarat. Significant also because he landed at the Bhuj Air Base, that same Air Force station which was targeted by Pakistan with its airstrikes, all of which, of course, was thwarted by India's air defenses. Prime Minister Modi in a sharp attack today on India's hostile neighbor to its west. Pakistan said that India waited for 15 days after Pahalgam, but when Pakistan showed no interest in acting against these terror hubs, India struck. It struck deep and it struck hard. He also had a question, in fact, a challenge for the Pakistani people, bypassing the Pakistani state and the Pakistani army, saying they need to decide whether people who use terror for politics, who use terror as an instrument of politics, whether they should be representing the Pakistani people. In fact, he posed this question to the Pakistani children as well. Let's listen in to what the Prime Minister said in what was a fiery speech from Bhuj.
साथियों, भारत टूरिज्म पर विश्वास करता है। टूरिज्म लोगों को जोड़ता है, लेकिन पाकिस्तान जैसा देश भी है जो टेररिज्म को ही टूरिज्म मानता है, और ये दुनिया के लिए बहुत बड़ा खतरा है। साथियों, हमारी नीति आतंकवाद के खिलाफ जीरो टॉलरेंस की है। ऑपरेशन सिंदूर ने इस नीति को और स्पष्ट कर दिया है। जो भी भारतीयों का खून बहाने की कोशिश करेगा, उसको उसकी भाषा में ही जवाब दिया जाएगा। भारत पर आंख उठाने वाले किसी भी कीमत पर बख्शे नहीं जाएंगे। भारत के टारगेट पर आतंकवादियों के हेडक्वार्टर थे। सैकड़ों किलोमीटर अंदर जाकर के अगल बगल में किसी का भी नुकसान हुए बिना सीधी चोट करके आ गए। सटीक वार किया। ये दिखाता है कि हमारी सेना कितनी सक्षम और कितनी अनुशासित है। हमने दुनिया को दिखाया कि हम आतंकवाद के अड्डों को, उनके ठिकानों को यहां बैठे बैठे मिट्टी में मिला सकते हैं।
Meanwhile, shifting focus now, the sinking of a cargo ship near the coast of Kerala on the 25th of May has raised very serious environmental concerns. There are more than 600 containers having oil and chemicals that have spilled over just off the Kerala coast. The vessel released substantial quantities of diesel, oil, and also certain carbides into the Arabian Sea, along with hazardous chemicals like calcium carbide. Now, the Kerala State Disaster Management Authority has issued a public warning. They have recommended against touching any of these containers of oil that may wash up on shore. In fact, you can see some of those pictures of those containers washing up, some in Alleppey, some in Kollam. Fishermen have also been asked not to go to the sea, and fishing has been banned in some areas in a 20-kilometer radius. This is leading to extreme concerns about how marine life could get polluted by these chemicals. Now, this oil spillage can pose several environmental threats and questions. The ecological damage that can be caused, the oil can also affect food sources for sea life and making it less available or of poorer quality. Oil coats marine animals, disrupting breathing, movement, and it is toxic if it is ingested, and it can damage organs and reproduction. It's not just that. Animals which survive the initial environmental hazards may still end up suffering in the weeks and months ahead. Ecosystems around that area, the coral reefs, the mangroves, the coastal habitats like the biodiversity-rich shores off the coast of Kerala, they can also suffer long-term damage because of these oil spillage. Oil smothers plants and disrupts food chains. It also impacts breeding and reproduction, for example, by contaminating bird or turtle nests on shore.
There's a high alert in the coastal areas of Kerala after a vessel capsized and hazardous materials, containers containing them, have fallen into the sea. About 27 containers have so far been washed ashore, 27 in Kollam district alone and 2 from Alappuzha district of Kerala. The authorities, the Coast Guard, the Navy, the State Disaster Management and the State Administration is trying to find solutions to this. There has been monitoring by the Coast Guard and the Navy. They're looking into whether there has been oil spills, what these hazardous materials are a cause of concern for the people of Kerala, especially those in the coastal area. Now, in most of these places where these containers have been washed to the shore, it's the coastal community, the fishermen community who go out regularly into the sea to catch the fish. So they are concerned whether their products will not have any value, whether there will be, whether people will be concerned about these hazardous chemicals. Many say that, especially in the coastal area, the houses are very close by, they are very close to the coast where these containers have been washed and brought to the shore. So they are concerned that what will be the hazardous chemicals or what are the side effects of this? Will it spread in the air? Will they have any problems? So these are all concerns that the people are facing. Their livelihood, many are saying that for a couple of days they're actually thinking of moving somewhere out to see what will happen. So the authorities have been warning the people to not go near the coast to these containers, whatever has been spotted or whatever is coming. In this particular spot itself, about 9 containers have been washed in, and they say that all of them were empty, but still the authorities say not to go close to it.
So the monsoon is well and truly arrived, not just in Kerala, but also further north in Maharashtra. It's an early onset of the monsoon this year, advanced by over a week now. Incessant rainfall today bringing Mumbai to a standstill. Railway tracks in multiple low-lying areas were submerged in water. Some parts of the city recorded more than 200 millimeters of rain, that too within the first 12 hours. That's a record for the very first day of the monsoons. It's the first time in 35 years that Mumbai is reporting the early onset of the monsoon. In fact, the Met Department has also issued a yellow alert for the city all the way up until Wednesday. So tomorrow also could be a rainy day in case you are in Mumbai. We have some of our reporters spread across the length and breadth of Mumbai, and these are the ground reports that they filed on what was quite a manic Monday, the very first day of the monsoon hitting Mumbai.
Currently, I am with the ingredient. This line is stopping from the RAJVR to Acharya Chowk. But we have seen the footage of the this network in which the entire water logging is taking place. Now the factor is logging only in the Worli station. It currently and from Worli.
With heavy rains having lashed the city of Mumbai, we are here at Kurla. In fact, there's waterlogging being reported at several locations across the city, including at Kurla, at Sanyal, at Tendamata. Also, some places in the town area are also experiencing waterlogging, including that at Mankale. In fact, right here at Kurla, we could see how the entire area is stopped for smaller vehicles. Some of the smaller vehicles here are experiencing difficulty to meander through this very route because of the waterlogging problem right here. In fact, this area has been kept out of bounds for smaller vehicles, and which is where there are several big pumps that have also been installed here to get the water out from here. In fact, this is very close to the high tide that has been predicted for right now. IMD has also changed the alert for today. There was a yellow alert. However, now IMD has
India has now surpassed Japan to become the world's fourth largest economy, citing data from the International Monetary Fund. The Niti Aayog CEO has shared this development over the weekend. With the economy now valued at over $4 trillion, India trails just the United States, China, and Germany to now become the fourth largest economy in the world. According to the April 2025 edition of the IMF's World Economic Outlook, the Indian economy is expected to grow by 6.2% in 2025 and 6.3% in 2026. That maintains a solid lead over all other regional peers, certainly. And also, now the expectation is that India will surpass Germany, which is the third largest economy in the world, in the next couple of years to become the third largest economy globally. Joining me now is Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal, economist and member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Thank you very much. First of all, many congratulations. India now the fourth largest economy officially as per the IMF's outlook that came out over the weekend. What is fascinating, though, is the speed at which it has happened. Every trillion. The first trillion got crossed in 2007. The second trillion took another 7 years from 2007 to 2014. Then the next trillion from 2014 to 2021. But the last trillion, that is from 3 trillion to 4 trillion, has gone in just the last 4 years. What would you attribute this faster pace of growth to, so much so India is now the fourth largest economy in the world?
Well, welcome to the joys of compounding. As with any kind of compounding, it is the result of now some 35 odd years of sustained growth. But what is interesting is that since in the post-COVID period, India has not only grown at a consistent pace, but by a very large margin over other large economies. So growing at somewhere in the 6 to 7% range consistently when many countries, most countries in the world are struggling to even manage 2-3% growth. In fact, countries like Japan or Germany are barely growing at all. So this is a situation where clearly this compounding process is now really flicking into our favor, and we are able to generate these kinds of expansions.
But Mr. Sanyal, one thing, of course, is that, we're number 4 now, and if we continue in the same trajectory, 6% plus growth over the next couple of years, the expectation is that India would surpass Germany by the middle of 2027. Germany is currently growing at under 1%, India is growing at over 6%. But it also comes at a time of intense, economic uncertainty, particularly on the trade front. You've seen the Trump tariffs, etc. What do you reckon are the headwinds between now and, let's say, 2027, when India is expected to surpass Germany, that could be an impediment in this fast rate of growth?
Well, there are two parts to this. When you're talking about international headwinds, do remember this is about relative performance when you're talking about rankings of economies. So if it's hurting us, it's also hurting Germany. So from that limited perspective, international headwinds don't really matter because both Germany and India face it. So we are growing at 6%, they are growing at less than 1%. So in that sense, in about 18 months to 24 months, we will surpass them. But in absolute terms, this is an issue. We are, growing at somewhere in the 6.5% range. But of course, despite the fact that we are the world's fourth largest economy now, in per capita terms, we are still quite poor. So we would like to grow even faster than this, perhaps over 7% a year. But it's difficult to do this under these circumstances. So, if in purely from a ranking perspective, it might not matter. But in terms of Viksit Bharat and our ambition of becoming a developed country over the next quarter of a century, this uncertainty does matter.
So what needs to be done to amp up that per capita income growth? Because India is currently about $2,500 per capita. China is probably 5 times more than that, more than $10,000 per capita. And in a big country with a young population, a large young population, how do you amp up that particular parameter?
So first of all, we are no longer at 2,500. We are now somewhere around $3,000 per capita income, which is still low, there too this compounding process will matter. So of course, I point out to them that in order to have higher per capita GDP, you need to have larger GDP. So this growth that we just talked about is important, but we need to speed it up. And we will be doing this, sustaining this growth at a time where the external environment may not be as conducive as was the case during China's high growth phase. There are many things that we therefore consequently need to do in terms of being flexible about the new environment. One of them is that we need to build quickly on bilateral trade deals because if we do want our export sector to add to our growth, then we need to adapt. So as you know, we have now recently done a free trade agreement with the UK. We are in advanced discussions on free trade with the US as well as with the European Union. And of course, we already have existing ones with Australia, Japan, the UAE, and so on. So we are building up a network of bilateral free trade agreements in order to be able to keep our export markets open. So that's one big area. The second big thing is to keep our domestic growth momentum going. And there, of course, many important things have happened in the last few years. One is that we have managed to bring inflation into a reasonable range of 2 to 6% with the inflation targeting. And in fact, right now, inflation is running at only 3%. So that gives us a degree of freedom to bring down our cost of capital in the long to medium run. So that is something very, very important, because once you brought down the cost of capital, that's important. Secondly, while there are always complaints about improving the GST, but the fact is GST is a huge innovation in terms of having united our market. You can always improve this system, but it was a massive jump from what used to exist before that, when we weren't even a unified market. So that was another big thing. But let me say that we need to keep doing more reforms forward, both to the GST and other things, but a myriad number of these process reforms that we need to keep doing. So whether it is ease of doing business, ease of living, and so on and so forth. And of course, we need to be open to international capital. Where, we want the world's companies to come here and invest. We want to become a part of the global supply chain. We want new technologies. So all of this needs to be done. And so this is not something, it's about doing one set of big reforms. It's a continuous process, and we have to be at it.
One final word, and there was a bit of a political controversy over the weekend with Mr. Jairam Ramesh of the Congress party tweeting that net FDI inflows have plunged. He is citing some data to show that it's plunged by almost 100% down to less than $1 billion. Of course, the BJP has rebutted that by saying you're confusing between net FDI and gross FDI. But how would you react to that? There is also politics over this. Is India growing fast enough? Is it growing fast enough to add 10 million or 15 million jobs every year? That this growth has not percolated down to the people who actually deserve it.
So I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I can respond to the facts. It is true that the gross FDI is doing well. It is also true that net FDI has fallen. So both of those facts are true. So let me explain what they are. So basically what is happening, a lot more money is coming into India as FDI in a gross terms, i.e. companies around the world are coming here, investing. There's some 80 billion plus worth of FDI that came into India, making, one of the best years ever was the last financial year. At the same time, do remember that there's a stock of past FDI, which means that there are foreign companies that have investments here, they are getting returns from that investment, which they may be taking and repatriating. So both of those processes is happening. What do we want as a policymaker? Well, I want that gross FDI to keep growing. And I also want that existing investors retain their money here in India rather than repatriate it. Now, both of these require that we keep investing in reforms here in India to make it as attractive as possible, not just for new investors, but we want the old investors to retain their resources here because they see this as being the fastest growing source of returns for them. So both of these need to be managed. And so that is the reason I said reforms have to be continuously done. As far as percolation of the growth to the rest of the country, let me say that while in general the western half of India has done much better than the eastern half of India. I'm not a proponent of the north-south divide. Actually, the divide in India in economic terms is east-west. And in this case, let me say that the best way for percolation to happen is for India to invest in big physical infrastructure in eastern India. And you're beginning to see that. You're beginning to see the highways, electricity supply, all kinds of things that were a problem in eastern part of the country now being invested in, northeast as well. Who would have imagined the chip manufacturing would be coming up in Guwahati of all places around. So we are beginning to take the eastern half of India seriously, and you are beginning to see some growth there as well as a result.
All right, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18 with your thoughts and perspective. Thank you for your time. And moving on, US President Donald Trump has escalated his attacks on Harvard University, threatening to redirect billions in federal funding to trade schools, while accusing the Ivy League institution of harboring anti-Semitism on campus and also shielding radicalized foreign students. Harvard University secured a temporary reprieve from the ban that was imposed by the Trump administration on enrolling foreign students. It managed to get a temporary injunction from a federal court, but this reprieve will not stop the looming threats that come from Donald Trump. Here's a deep dive into the road ahead for both the university, one of the most prestigious in the world, and also the foreign students, including 700 plus Indian foreign students who are studying in Harvard right now.
International schools as well.
In a stunning escalation of his war on elite institutions, Donald Trump has turned his spotlight yet again on Harvard. This time, the demand is blunt. Reveal the names and nationalities of all foreign students. Trump claims nearly 31% of Harvard students are from foreign lands, some from countries that are allegedly not friendly to the US.
Because we have Americans that want to go there and to other places, and they can't go there because you have 31% foreign. Now, no foreign government contributes money to Harvard. We do. So why are they doing so many? Number one. Number two, we want a list of those foreign students, and we'll find out whether or not they're okay.
He says these nations pay nothing for their students' education, while America foots the bill. His post on Truth Social calls this a reasonable request. Trump's administration has moved to revoke Harvard's ability to enroll international students, a decision now temporarily blocked by a federal judge in Boston. The court ruling by Judge Alison Burroughs calls the Trump move unconstitutional and a threat to thousands of students. But the relief is temporary. The broader legal fight is just beginning. Harvard sued the administration, arguing that kicking out its 6,800 plus international students would cause immediate and irreparable injury to the institution and the students. University President Alan Garber went further, accusing the White House of retaliation and calling the action a blatant violation of the Constitution. The administration, though, isn't backing down. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has made it clear, either Harvard complies or loses access to the student visa system. Trump's battle with Harvard has been brewing for years now. He's frozen billions in funding, threatened its tax-exempt status, and now accuses the university of harboring anti-Semitism, enabling campus protests, and colluding with the Chinese Communist Party. Harvard says this is a political assault on academic freedom and that it's already taken steps to address incidents of anti-Semitism. But Trump's latest strike has global consequences. From India to Taiwan, students are scrambling to figure out if their dreams of studying at Harvard are collapsing overnight.
I don't agree with Trump's policies on this specific topic, and I think Harvard should allow their students to continue learning and being a part of Harvard.
I think it's terrible. I think it's unfair. I think that it's an infringement on the university's private kind of sovereignty. I think, Trump is really depriving students who are qualified just because they're from somewhere else, and I hope that, he's not able to do that.
New admits the alumni, the outrage is only growing.
I think it will impact the schools negatively, and I think the US will lose a lot of respect from international schools as well.
Incoming students are equally shaken. Many students now face a choice between deferring their Harvard admission or finding alternatives in Europe or the UK.
We're certainly feeling pretty nervous, and it's been a dream for me to come from a small town in Taiwan all the way to Harvard, and the preparation is not limited to TOEFL and all the standardized tests or even the documents we present in the statement of purpose, but it includes a set of preparations, including accumulating experiences in leadership, in community service when we are in our undergraduate years.
At the heart of this is Trump's demand, a full list of all international students' names and nationalities. Harvard has refused. The administration's retaliation was swift, revoking the university's Student and Exchange Visitor Program certification, which is what allows it to sponsor foreign students. Without it, thousands risk deportation or forced transfers. The Department of Homeland Security has given Harvard a 72-hour deadline to provide records, disciplinary files, protest footage, and details of any illegal or dangerous activity by foreign students. Harvard called the demand invasive and unconstitutional. This crackdown isn't just targeting students. Caught in the crossfire are names like Princess Elizabeth of Belgium, heir to the throne and a current Harvard student, and Cleo Carney, daughter of Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Their futures now hang in the balance. Harvard is often seen as a global brand, but is suddenly looking like a closed club under siege.
Russia and Ukraine continued with their long-range cross-border drone attacks well into Monday as well. This is despite US President Donald Trump and his massive criticisms of late of Presidents Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. The latest signal of Trump's frustration came when he said on Truth Social last night that Putin had gone completely crazy and that he was absolutely considering increasing American sanctions on Russia in response to the latest violence. There was a huge uptick of drone attacks from Russia into major Ukrainian cities like Kiev and Kharkiv, while Moscow has dismissed the criticism coming in from Trump, calling it an emotional overload. Ukrainian President Zelensky has accused Russia of acting with total impunity. Russia has been accused of waging another massive wave, an onslaught really, of overnight air attacks on Ukraine, including in key cities like Kiev.
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
President, what do you want to do about that?
I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. We'll see what we're going to do. All right, any other questions? I don't like what Putin is doing, not even a little bit. He's killing people. And something happened to this guy, and I don't like it.
Of course, the start of the negotiation process, for which the American side has done a lot, is a very important achievement. We are very thankful to the Americans and to President Trump personally for his assistance in organizing and launching this negotiation process. At the same time, this is a very important achievement with an emotional overload of everyone. We will follow this very closely.
Co-presented by This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
The world in the next couple of years to become the third largest economy globally. Joining me now is Dr. Sanjeev Sanyal, economist and member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Thank you very much. First of all, many congratulations. India now the fourth largest economy officially as per the IMF's outlook that came out over the weekend. What is fascinating, though, is the speed at which it has happened. Every trillion The first trillion got crossed in 2007. The second trillion took another 7 years from 2007 to 2014. Then the next trillion from 2014 to 2021. But the last trillion, that is from 3 trillion to 4 trillion, has gone in just the last 4 years. What would you attribute this faster pace of growth to, so much so India is now the fourth largest economy in the world?
Well, welcome to the joys of compounding. As with any kind of compounding, it is the result of now some 35 odd years of sustained growth. But what is interesting is that since in the post-COVID period, India has not only grown at a consistent pace, but by a very large margin over other large economies. So growing at somewhere in the 6 to 7% range consistently when many countries, most countries in the world are struggling to even manage 2-3% growth. In fact, countries like Japan or Germany are barely growing at all. So this is a situation where clearly this compounding process is now really flicking into our favor, and we are able to generate these kinds of expansions.
But Mr. Sanyal, one thing, of course, is that, we're number 4 now, and if we continue in the same trajectory, 6% plus growth over the next couple of years, the expectation is that India would surpass Germany by the middle of 2027. Germany is currently growing at under 1%, and India is growing at over 6%. But it also comes at a time of intense, economic uncertainty, particularly on the trade front. You've seen the Trump tariffs, etc. What do you reckon are the headwinds between now and, let's say, 2027, when India is expected to surpass Germany, that could be an impediment in this fast rate of growth?
Well, there are two parts to this. When you're talking about international headwinds, do remember this is about relative performance when you're talking about rankings of economies. So if it's hurting us, it's also hurting Germany. So from that limited perspective, international headwinds don't really matter because both Germany and India face it. So we are growing at 6%, they are growing at less than 1%. So in that sense, in about 18 months to 24 months, we will surpass them. But in absolute terms, this is an issue. We are, growing at somewhere in the 6.5% range. But of course, despite the fact that we are the world's 4th largest economy now, in per capita terms, we are still quite poor. So we would like to grow even faster than this, perhaps over 7% a year. But it's difficult to do this under these circumstances. So, if in purely from a ranking perspective, it might not matter. But in terms of Viksit Bharat and our ambition of becoming a developed country over the next quarter of a century, this uncertainty does matter.
So what needs to be done to amp up that per capita income growth? Because India is currently about $2,500 per capita. China is probably 5 times more than that, more than $10,000 per capita. And in a big country with a young population, a large young population, how do you amp up that particular parameter?
So first of all, we are no longer at 2,500. We are now somewhere around $3,000 per capita income, which is still low, there too this compounding process will matter. So of course, I point out to them that in order to have higher per capita GDP, you need to have larger GDP. So this growth that we just talked about is important, but we need to speed it up, and we will be doing this sustaining this growth at a time where the external environment may not be as conducive as was the case during China's high growth phase. There are many things that we therefore consequently need to do in terms of being flexible about the new environment. One of them is that we need to build quickly on bilateral trade deals because if we do want our export sector to add to our growth, then we need to adapt. So as you know, we have now recently done a free trade agreement with the UK. We are in advanced discussions on free trade with the US as well as with the European Union. And of course, we already have existing ones with Australia, Japan.
Viewers, today
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is celebrating his 11th anniversary in office. Indeed, on this day in 2014, Prime Minister Modi was elected as India's Prime Minister and took office for the first time. It's been 11 years since that day. And today, viewers, as he continues into a third